Hi, welcome to this another episode focusing on Ben Shapiro and Breakfast without Tiffany.
As I get older, I think the mark of a good person, or at least a person who's trying, is a person who wakes up in the middle of the night worried about the mistake they made the previous day. And how do you fix that? And mark of a person who's going to have problems is a person who wakes up in the middle of the night angry at what somebody else did to them.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely truth to that. There's definitely truth to that. But having said that, it reminds me of people that say,
All right, welcome everyone back to the School of Greatness. We've got Ben Shapiro in the house.
Thanks for having me, dude. I appreciate it.
Very excited about this. As we were talking before we just started, I don't know anything about politics. I don't follow politics. I'm probably the least ignorant person, or the most ignorant person about the topics that you cover. So this is going to be interesting for me.
Yeah.
Not that I really need to go into politics. I'm more fascinated about you as a person, how you think and how you work and how you solve problems.
so I think he really summed it up that he really doesn't respect people who are worried about who people who wake up in the middle of the night thinking about what other people have done to them. But the problem with Ben Shapiro, it's all about him. And he doesn't realize that there's no such thing as objective reality. There's subjective reality. And he speaks from a very privileged place. He's very confident. He's very cocky. And when you look at his background, you can understand why. And I want to say a little bit about our shared heritage. We even have the same last names, except mine was Shapiro before I married. And I want to say that the Jewish religion really praises men. I always said to my boys, Judaism is great for men. Boys and men, great. Judaism allows men to be the dominant ones. They're the ones who are leading the prayers. And then they say, no, we respect women. Women are so great. But it's a male-dominated religion. So let's start with that. And he's a man. So he's been raised in a male-dominated religion that when boys count, this I think is true also for Indian culture. For a lot of cultures, boys count more than girls. I certainly grew up now, in hindsight, my brother, who was a disaster in school, but was very good in being a con artist, as it turned out, was absolutely admired by my mother. I can say the same for my father, but he passed at a young age. But my mother absolutely worshipped my brother. He could fix things. He was a typical stereotype dumb guy, but he was very good in life. He was very good at being a con artist. And in Judaism, being a man is really praised. And she came from a religious background. And as much as she turned her back to religion, there are certain things that stick with you. And I often analyze why I am the way I am, why I also thought that I would be not important if there was this drive in me that I recognize in girls that are like millenniums. Young girls have the same drive. If I don't have a man, what am I? Women that are successful, that are educated, they still feel they're worthless without a man. That's not only in Judaism, but in Judaism, big time. And I'm talking about culturally Jewish as well. A man is like everything because they lead the prayers. They're the center. They're the apple of the eye of religion. So when he grew up in a religious background, and I think he's still religious, he's like, I'm a man. So everything is about him. He's very confident, and he doesn't understand how other people can be victims. Doesn't realize how African Americans can be victims of a systemic racism, how women can be victims. He doesn't understand how people can actually really be victims. And I think it's important to acknowledge that somebody's a victim. And I think what the average African American has to go through is definitely different than the average Jewish American had to go through. Yes, there's systemic prejudice against Jews, but look at the difference. Jews have been always protected by their faith and their religious practices that really sheltered them. It's a very good religion for men and boys. It really makes you feel good. God is protecting you. You are chosen. Everything is great. Women, no. And it's not a coincidence that Barbara Streisand filmed Yentl, which I think she did a disservice because it's a great story. But it was written by a Jewish writer, Isaac Bashevis Singer, who I admire. The older I get, the more I realize what an amazing person he is. Whether he's speaking about animal rights, whether about women's rights. He was amazing Yiddish writer, Nobel Literature winner, Isaac Bashevis Singer. And the story Yentl is about this woman who really feels like she has to be to pretend to be a boy in order to get the things that boys get in the Jewish culture, religion. Oh, she wants to study, and girls at that time couldn't study. So you say, "Oh, don't look at yourself as a victim." But these are layers. These are layers and layers on layers of history, making a human being the way they are. And we give boys and girls subliminal messages. It's in the subconscious. We can't even control it. When we treat boys and girls differently without even knowing it, and we don't acknowledge that we treat boys and girls differently, that we treat other people differently based on our prejudices, then we can't go forward. And when he says, "Oh, the Democratic Party has done such bad things to the African Americans," yes, that may be the case. Every politician makes mistakes, but it's about ideology and it's about where you want to be. And Trump doesn't want to be in a place where people are equal. He wants to be in a place where his ego is being fed. I think he's a genius. I think Ben Shapiro is a very talented guy. When he talks, he's like, blah, 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 blah. He just shoots. It's like a shotgun. And his brain works fast. But you know what doesn't work? His heart. He doesn't have any compassion. And maybe I'm the opposite. Like, I really speak from my heart. And when I see somebody who grew up in a society where they were not considered worthy, when I hear of stories of African Americans being targeted by police officers, it's scary. When I see African Americans in the media, and then I see African people walking around Israel, and even though we have racism, we admit we have racism, but when I see how we don't have this, we don't have police shooting African people, and I've seen intoxicated people, African refugees, and nobody stops them. And at least I haven't seen them stopped. I haven't seen them targeted, especially. They have jobs. They're always employed. Even when there's no unemployment, they'll be employed because Israel gets the idea that if they're not going to be employed, they're going to be a problem. So we have a very high employment, I think, of African refugees. They're working in supermarkets. You'll always see them in supermarket on the beach. Now, Ben Shapiro doesn't realize that what it's like to live in somebody else's skin. You can look at statistics and research. Yes, it's the person's. He says in one of his clips that it's a personal decision to choose crime. He doesn't realize that what it's like to grow up African American with all these layers and layers and layers of history, and what it's like to be enslaved. Like, we as a Jewish people, we're supposed to be slaves in Egypt, according to the Bible. And we're supposed to be aware of other people having the same rights as us. But you know what? Some of these privileged American Jews, I don't want to generalize, but this Ben Shapiro is the ultimate conservative Jew who's been in this private school system, has no idea what it's like to be in the public school system. I do. I went to American public school system in New York, which is tough terrain. And let me tell you, it's not easy. It's a big difference than the schools my kids went to. And even in Europe, schools are tough. Public schools are tough. My son went to a public school system in Europe. He was targeted as a Jew, and he doesn't look more Jewish than Ben Shapiro. He doesn't have a yarmulke either when he went to school. But you know what? It's tough terrain in public school systems. So let's just say it. Even when teachers in Europe are paid the best salaries anywhere, you're going to have problems. I don't think I've met like really intelligent teachers and my kids, whether in the Jewish school system or the public school system, but I don't know. They were not like, wow, that's a great teacher. There are not a lot of teachers I could say, wow, in my childhood, wow, they were great teachers. But having said that, um, Ben Shapiro is looking at research. He's trying to pinpoint the finger and blaming the victims, saying that African Americans are at fault when they choose a life of crime. I don't think anybody really chooses crime because they're happy people. I don't think happy people take drugs. I don't think happy people choose to break into a store and steal the TV. I don't think rioters are happy. I think if you're a happy person, you don't burn down a city. I think these are unhappy people. And yes, I do believe we have to understand what makes the unhappy people tick in order to be more compassionate people. What I learned from my yoga school, which was my best school, was that compassion is the driving force. And if you're not going to be compassionate, and Ben Shapiro and the conservatives are always like pointing the finger at the victim. You are, you shouldn't wake up in the middle of the night saying what other people did to you. Your mind is not that easy to reprogram. And when you've been through abuse, and I can speak from firsthand, you cannot just turn it off like you switch off the computer. It's much more complex. The human mind and the psyche, whether you want to differentiate psyche and mind, it's a big issue. The human emotional system is not that easy. And with people like Ben, people like Trump, it's so easy. We're doing so much for you. You should be grateful. Look at what the Trump is doing for people. You know what? The minute he doesn't allow police officers to have this race awareness training, the minute he denies this systemic racism, the minute he doesn't denounce racism, the minute he actually speaks badly about every human being in a disgusting way, this is the face of America, and this is the face of Ben Shapiro. So when he supports this sort of garbage people that treat other people like garbage, I call them garbage people because they treat other people like garbage. The way you treat other people says a lot about who you are. Stop blaming people that are in difficult situations that you would know nothing about, nor do you want to. Get out of your stupid Harvard research and whatever, and realize that research is biased. Everything is biased. We're all biased. We all grow up in a certain household. And I'll be the first one to admit that I have biases, but I'll also be the first one to admit that I'm really fortunate that my parents didn't really encourage me to be racist. They didn't, like Donald Trump's father, deny people rent to live in their apartment because of their skin color. Yes, I picked up that my family doesn't treat everybody the same. I picked it up, but I'm also have become aware of it somehow, because I did work on myself. Ben Shapiro's never done the work. He's never done the work about being compassionate towards other people. He's just like thinking rationally about research says that African Americans are responsible for being criminals. Yes, but you never tried to walk in their shoes. And as the Native Americans who have also been systematically discriminated against, say, try to walk in somebody's shoe for 3 days and then tell them how they're going to be. And Ben Shapiro's never even thought about trying to feel what African Americans are feeling.
As I started going down the rabbit hole of your video content, I became just so impressed with your ability to communicate a message, make a point, and win your point. You're really great at debate and winning your arguments and ideas based on facts.
Because he is a refrigerator. Ben Shapiro doesn't have emotions. He doesn't work from the heart. When you lose a debate is when you get really passionate about a topic, or you identify with it. Ben Shapiro is very rational. He is all about rationality. But, let's talk about Jews a little bit. After what Jews have undergone for centuries and the Holocaust, yes, let's mention the Holocaust. How can we be How can we judge other people? How can we not show the compassion that Jews needed in Europe and lacked? We didn't have compassionate. People didn't put themselves in our shoes. How can we be so lacking emotions when speaking about people who have difficult life circumstances? So most Jews vote Democrat for this exact reason. And my